The veneer of civilization has always been thin, and many regional civilizations have risen and fallen. But civilization now faces a global and existential threat. So in this collection, I wanted to explore themes such as the fragility of our existence and relationships, the power of nature, the impact of technology, and the climate breakdown, using traditional poetic forms, and especially the sonnet. I wanted the poems to be universal, focusing on human condition and our need for humility in the face of the implacable power of nature. The cover and the photograph you see in the background behind Janice there, that's based on a photograph that I took in the New South Wales Greater Blue Mountains World Heritage Area. And this is now UNESCO protected bushland. In each of these 14 lines of fractures, the sonnets, you'll read of loss, jealousy, betrayal, of solitude, and those moments between life and death. The book's divided into 4 sections: life, relationships, society, and civilization. And I'll cover each of these in turn. The first section, life. When I was young, I remember reading a quote by the mountaineer Eric Shipton, which motivated many of my adventures. He said, "There are few treasures of more lasting worth than the experience of a way of life which in itself is wholly satisfying. Such, after all, are the only possessions of which no fate, no cosmic catastrophe can deprive us. Nothing can alter the fact if for one moment in eternity we have really lived." It's the expression of these moments, sometimes numinous, that make good subjects for sonnets. I lived in Sydney for many years, and Australia is notable in having an urban Western civilization in close proximity to national parks with wilderness areas. And I spent much time hiking in this sometimes perilous bushland. 8 of these poems in the book are set in this country, in Australia, and others are set in North America, around Europe, and in New Zealand. However, not all the poems are autobiographical. Indeed, rather than set in actual locations, some poems are allegorical, and it's for you, the reader, to find your own interpretations. In this first section, life, there's a focus on moments between life and death, when nature could be about to overwhelm an individual, but sometimes leaving the outcome ambiguous. I'd like to open with my first poem, an allegory about the transience of life and the need, as Shipton says, to seize the day. This very short poem is in 2 parts. This is called At the Tumbleweed Diner. Daybreak. From the farthest booth, you can gaze out at dust devils. By the window there, you sit on the shore of a burning day. A corvette slumbers in the dawn light, caught in fish bones of the car lot. Beyond, the unbound scrubland. You feel the bitter hug of your first coffee, bottomless. Catch the glint of a jetliner's trail, silver sum of 100 lives departing. You hail a waitress as she glides by. Sundown. Over the car lot, figments of lanterns hanging in the glassed-off murk. You savor the mood, a burgeoning quiet. In this moth light, you tip your mug, deepen the dregs, a bystander to the blacktop. The Corvette's gone, faces forgotten, ketchup stains and coffee rings remain. A waitress wheels out a pail and mop. The next poem is inspired by a photograph taken by that great American landscape photographer, Ansel Adams. It's called Looking West Across Snake River to Grand Teton Mountains. No witness but me to this wreck of heaven, fallen in a cloud crash of blue marbled ice. Fixing this scene, I scan titanic spires. Down those sheer crags, a man would drop for 10 seconds, a mote of screaming life. I watch eagles soar, 10 minutes, thermaling up. I clatter out my tripod, set the shutter, the lens to wide angle, wipe off a smudge. Waiting. Clouds my seconds, scudding showers my minutes, wool shirt sticking on cold sweat. My sky will be perfect black, ice fields white. This my last ascent, no want of reminders, the struggling for breath. Then in the viewer, perfection, this study of solitude. Thank you. So the last poem in the first section of life is called Snowbound. Starving. My last hot meal was just warm porridge. I climb with crunching boots through pristine snow and past the refuge, following yellow poles, a headache of haste before the pass closes. My tunnel of garb flaps as the wind strengthens. It comes galumphing down from icebound peaks and then vents as if there was a tear in heaven, buffeting my cupped match of body heat. Across these crumpled rags of hills that spread all the way to winter, threadbare and old, I struggle on with a less certain tread. Under an acetylene sun, yet cold, I stagger, kick icy feathers like a clown, then lay my head and soul on weightless down. Thank you. The next section, entitled Relationships, focus on one of those underlying characteristics of society, the relationships between people. And here the poems speak of breakups, betrayal, loss, solitude, and makeups. The first poem is about solitude, and it's called Enduring Solitude. Not one word had passed my lips since dawn broke. I roamed that winter park of beasts alone, past empty pens, while through a stand of pines swept a whispering wind, sharp as broken bone. Between the stark, sleet-wet columns, I glimpsed bison like some far archipelago, their moist eyes dully leaking out their lives, the herd not heeding if I stay or go. At dusk, I sat inside a vaulted cafe of leather, candles, linen and champagne, and other singles caught in mirrors mused their fate. Should I go, or perhaps remain? Not a word, not one utterance since dawn. Then a waitress asked me, why so forlorn? The next one's called A Seamstress Considers Her Options. The trap awaits outside, its horse a bay, jangling its traces by dank stone walls. With her income gone, life has spun away like moonbright shillings dropped down a well. Before a mirror and peonies, red as her nightmares, she begins her theatre of poisons, gathers her powdered white lead and black moon-shaped patches of taffeta. She mouths a humid oath, then covers her scars, touches rouge to her lips, feeling the pink sting. There, ready, she thinks, but her shaking marks the proximity of panic and skin. For the lamp-lit stage, the candle-lit trysts, for the age-old trap that men can't resist. It's a villanelle called Storms Across Europe. Blowing hot, all high pressure since last week, but snowstorms then surged past the calm Azores. Blowing cold, all signs show the outlook's bleak. El Pais flutters with news of yesterday. Skull-like villas gaze out on silent shores. Blowing hot, all high pressure since last week. A steel-hued sea freights in a norwesterly. It skirts the crowded shamrock, rattling doors, blowing cold. All signs show the outlook's bleak. The waiters, idle, all strop and lethargy, near the Parthenon, in the new agoras. Blowing hot, all high pressure since last week. Yells from bingo halls distract the elderly from storms that scour this town of discount stores. Blowing cold, all signs show the outlook's bleak. Politicians talk, briefed so expertly, they'll finish soon, the BBC assures. Blowing hot, all high pressure since last week. Blowing cold, all signs show the outlook's bleak. Thank you. The next poem's called Running Fifth Avenue. On this island, off the coast of itself, in high acres of glass, the cloud are trapped, while shive light gleams through the silos of cash. He stares, standing on the sidewalk, a deep well of vertigo, a matted blanket wrapped around his shoulders. No scraps in the trash. Poised, with violent eyes like a black bear, people pass. In that old light of slow blues, all of their shoes teem past like river salmon. Envy possesses him, creeps from its lair. He spies a girl's purse, the leather strap loose. She's silver sunlight on the stream of Maman. For her, that ardent morning had begun so well. He fixes his prey, then he runs. I once read this next poem out to a group, and there was a young person in it who thought that doodlebug was an insect. And I think the assembled company understand what it was in World War II, so I don't need to explain any further. And that's the name of this poem. A carriage clock, it ticks above the fire. Smells of coal tar soap mixed with chimney smoke. A kettle exhales, hob hot on gas jets, clouding up the garden view where raindrops burst in marquisite pools, but not one sound disturbs the placid room. Photos arranged on shelves, a lamp lit to fend off nightfall. Here stands a wireless, a model Spitfire, threadbare armchairs that reek of cigar smoke. High tea is set, a vase as black as jet, with long stemmed roses. Faded, a petal drops. Far overhead, a droning engine sound, insignificant, muffled by the rain. It sputters out, then silence falls. Seen through a prism of people. A busy road quarrels with the fractious heat, snaps back at a tap of snares, throb of a song, as waves of protesters pulse through the street. Buoyant chests and flashing teeth of all ages, a rapture of young lungs, knowing they're not wrong. Banners unfurl like eels, flyers like lures. We see others in their littering wake, touts, hawking t-shirts, and, partially obscured, heavier men with bottles, itching to fly. From their angry placards, they have no doubts. The grammar of their grievance stops debate. But mannequins observe with shop-soiled eyes, while CCTVs glare with glass and hate, imprinting one truth of the many lies. Thank you. Many of the poems in this book use traditional form, like sonnets. So for those perhaps not so familiar, I just want to say a few words about sonnets. It's a form that's been used for hundreds of years, originally to express loss and love, but more recently, increasingly used for contemporary subjects. And many of the sonnets in this book are modern sonnets that follow, to a lesser degree, the established rules. They nearly always have a turn of events or mood about just over halfway through, and typically a sonnet has 14 lines, saying just enough and no more. I love the concision of a sonnet. It's a good discipline, which can create an intense emotional effect through the juxtaposition of ideas. So in the final section of Thin Veneer, Civilization, I'm focusing on the impact of technology and also the effect of climate breakdown on our Western civilization. In addition to the proximity of national parks and wildernesses, Australian lifestyles also lie on the front line of the climate breakdown. You'll all have heard recently of the bushfires and floods, and I'm sure my awareness of the issues arose from the period that I spent in that country. So this section of the book includes poems that are a personal response to that threat, and I'm going to read 3. The first is called The Promise of Magic. All eyes are on the high wire act, none on the wires as she twirls to screams of delight. Below, the crowds are gorging on fun and candy floss in darkness lanced by beams of spotlights. Trailing cables coil, humming like wasps in the wings, where scaffolds of magic gleam, where foremen count out coins for clowns and tumblers. On a horizon left ajar for dawn, cumulus promise floods as he walks his dog across the downs. Barking breaks the morning's newly minted stillness. Halfway to briar seams, his border collie has found not his stick of dog spit and dew, but some menace. Faces of clowns on flyers, flattened ground, the grass as dead as the big tops promise. The next one is called Terra Incognita. This is God's own country, he says to his son through fierce tears, but the terracotta dirt is dry as clinker. A leafless ghost gum fingernails the sky as insectile heat enfolds him, intimate as death, feasting on sweat. Out of sight in his scungy kitchen, his tap drips once. From out of the hot nowhere, a zephyr swirls. A fly screen door bangs. His rows of wheat lie flat like torn up shrouds. Each full dark, the empty dingoes stray in, tongues lolling, their tattoo of want a necklace round his house. He whispers to his son, never seen the like of this. But his son is out, a truckie hauling water to the towns. Thank you. Last poem, although not the last in the book, which I'll come to in a moment. It's called Litterpick. Dressed in high-vis, we wade on, black sacks bunched, our glass percussion of jars and jangling tins. Through stubbled fields, the river witters past. It clutches our calves, tells us lurid tales of burst banks and ruins. We poke the nettles with pickers for plastic, hung out as prayer flags, shattered bottles like jewels scattered from rotted coffins. We banter about our score, our tally of bags. With a pulley, heave out shopping trolleys buried in ferns. The undertow, like some rising tsunami under silken shrouds, drags us downstream. A surge foams around a rusted bike. The river turns around a bend, a tipping point, reveals to us all its works. We arrive at a stone bridge, collapsed, a pile-up of cars, some overturned. Our mood dies in a funeral of smiles. No sighs of survivors. Our discarded sacks float on like black swans. I telephone an SOS. In the wreckage, a Hyundai and its driver, not driving. Her grey tresses billowing, dead as a dress.